Vladimir Putin, during the plenary session of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, RSPP, outlined Russia's economic strategy amid Western sanctions and shifting global power dynamics. He emphasized that with over 28,595 sanctions imposed on Russia, more than on all other nations combined, the country has been forced to adapt and strengthen its economic sovereignty. Putin criticized the G7, questioning its significance. He noted that while some foreign companies left Russia in 2022 are now seeking to return, Russian businesses that replace them will be given priority. Watch this.
Mr. Shakin, friends, colleagues. Mr. Shakin has mentioned my schedule. Indeed, the Russian Constitution grants broad presidential powers. However, I would like to emphasize that your work remains critically important regardless of constitutional authority, because you represent vast workforces and bear responsibility for the social and economic well-being of millions of workers. There are always many pressing issues. Mr. Shakin has just spoken about protecting the interests of bona fide purchasers and matters related to privatization. We have discussed this extensively, and rightly so. These discussions must continue until a final resolution is reached. At the same time, Mr. Shakin noted that not all major businesses and corporations are eager to join the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs and suggested that perhaps they need some encouragement. Even within your community, philosophical contradictions, as scholars might say, sometimes emerge. But we will continue our work, engage in discussions, and, I hope, find solutions. I am delighted to welcome all participants of the plenary session, which brings together leading Russian companies, true market leaders, including those on a global scale. First and foremost, I want to thank the members of the RSPP for their commitment to the national development agenda and their active role in shaping measures that strengthen our economy and sovereignty. Their efforts contribute to making Russia's investment and business climate more favorable and aligned with entrepreneurs' needs. This work helps Russian enterprises and their employees to gain a clear understanding of long-term prospects, develop growth strategies, and make informed decisions that benefit both individual companies and entire industries. Hopefully, I will be able to answer some questions outlined by Mr. Shakin. If not, we will have a meeting with the RUIE Bureau. We will have an opportunity to discuss certain issues behind closed doors, as they say, and in an absolutely frank manner. In fact, there are many challenges in this regard, including the need to upgrade the real sector's legislative framework, remove excessive barriers, and generally improve the regulatory environment for businesses. In a word, we are talking about a complex, multifaceted cooperation that, regrettably, is not without hitches. Regretfully, some papers get stuck somewhere, there are protracted coordination procedures, as has been mentioned right now, or problems and uncertainties arise, which could not be envisaged, problems that impede the common effort. It is quite right that you directly outline these problem areas. I am confident that your colleagues from the government will cooperate with you in promptly addressing these issues and will interact with you in the interests of the state and the entrepreneurial community. Let me note that the Russian business community has faced significant challenges over the recent years. We are well aware of this. These include a powerful sanctions pressure, primarily restrictions on international settlements and transactions on external markets. As a whole, these and other challenges are undermining the freedom of trade and investment in the world economy. I will also say a few words about this as an aside. Importantly, Russian entrepreneurs have learned to work under sanctions during this period. They have adapted to sanctions, inventing and launching alternative mechanisms for cooperation with foreign partners, those who want to work with us. Besides, sanctions have become an additional catalyst of sorts to positive structural changes in the Russian economy, including in finance and technology, and in many other key spheres. I know that the business and expert communities are actively discussing the future of the illegitimate sanctions against Russia, Russian companies, and citizens. Whether they will be lifted, remain in force, intensify, etc. Friends and colleagues, I suggest that we proceed from the following considerations. Indeed, these considerations lie on the surface. Sanctions are neither temporary nor targeted measures. They constitute a mechanism of systemic, strategic pressure against our nation. Regardless of global developments or shifts in the international order, our competitors will perpetually seek to constrain Russia and diminish its economic and technological capacities. Moreover, whereas the so-called Western elites previously attempted to cloak this confrontation in propriety, they now evidently seem to no longer feel the need to be concerned about appearances. Nor do they intend to be. They not only routinely threaten Russia with new sanctions, but churn out these packages incessantly. One gains the impression that even the architects themselves have lost track of the restrictions imposed and their targets. Here, the Ministry of Finance has tallied them. I state with confidence, 28,595 sanctions against individuals and legal entities. This exceeds, by a significant margin, all sanctions ever imposed on all other nations combined. Even if there is some gesture from their side, say, they propose to lift or ease something, we can expect that another way will be found to exert pressure, to throw a spanner in the works, as was the case with the well-known Jackson-Vanik Amendment. The Soviet Union, against which it was originally introduced, no longer existed, and relations between Russia and the United States of America were at their absolute best, as good as they could possibly be. Yet the amendment continued to remain in force. And when it was seemingly repealed, it was in fact simply replaced with another restrictive instrument against Russia. Recall this: repealed, then supplanted. I reiterate, sanctions and restrictions are the reality of the existing new stage of development that the entire world, the entire global economy, has entered. The global competitive struggle has intensified, assuming increasingly sophisticated and uncompromising forms. Thus, literally before our eyes, a new spiral of economic rivalry is unfolding, and under these conditions, it is almost embarrassing to recall the norms and rules of the World Trade Organization, once zealously promoted by the West. Once. When? When these rules advantaged them. As soon as they became disadvantageous, everything began to change. And all these negotiations stalled. And, in fact, no one needs them anymore. This is evident, and I have emphasized it repeatedly. A return to pre-existing conditions is impossible. We should not anticipate fully unfettered trade, payments, or capital flows, nor rely on Western mechanisms to safeguard investor and entrepreneur rights. Yes, Alexander Shakin referenced this, and I opened with it. We have our own systemic problems related to privatization, to the protection of the rights of bona fide acquirers. My stance is known. Some matters are still stalled, but jointly, we will ensure that this issue is finally resolved. What do I want to say? Our challenges exist, but theirs are also abundant. We must acknowledge that even in the past, these mechanisms faltered. I am referring to those proposed by our so-called Western partners. And now the facade, as they say, has collapsed. It has become clear to everyone what the various high courts in European capitals are worth, the Western jurisdictions that many sought out to hide themselves and quietly conceal something. That's it. None of that exists anymore. And there are no opaque jurisdictions left. In these conditions, it is important for Russian businesses to show flexibility, explore new markets, design their own technological solutions, and establish cooperation with reliable partners. There are many of them in the world. Of course, the government and the regions must provide, and are providing, the required support here. For my part, I will do everything possible to support this process. Russia is strengthening its sovereignty in all areas that would ensure the operation of businesses, such as the development of transport, logistics, and financial and payment infrastructure. We are already doing this and will definitely keep doing it. I know and understand the challenges you are facing, but we will do everything to help you. Let me stress, only those countries that can ensure real, full sovereignty become stable in general and resistant to external pressure, and can progress dynamically in the interests of their people. Let me give you a clear example. In fact, it is well known, but I will nevertheless use the occasion to say it again. We can see that most European countries have lost their sovereignty, and as a result they have faced serious problems both in the economy and in the security sphere. As for the economy, all of them have near zero growth rates or are even entering a recession. On the contrary, the BRICS countries and those that wish to join the association understand the benefit of combining potentials, and in recent years they have been leaders in global growth, creating a high benchmark for economic dynamics. Let me remind you that the GDP growth of the Eurozone was 0.9% in 2024, I mean of the Big Seven. Why is it big? It is not clear. What is big about it? Wherever you look, you can't find any of them on the map. It has the growth of 1.9%, while the BRICS has 4.9%. In Russia, it was 4.1% for 2 years in a row, last year and the year before. I know, and I'll talk about this now, of course. By the way, you applauded to yourselves. These are your results. Thank you. I will applaud you. We were just talking, Mr. Shakin did, about the cooling of the economy. Of course, we need to proceed with a great deal of caution in this regard. Clearly, this is unavoidable, and the government and the central bank mentioned it, too. It seems a general agreement has been reached. We need to make sure that things in practice turn out as planned, and we do not let things cool down too much like in a cryotherapy chamber. Things should go smoothly and slowly. I am not going to now. The figures are known. The central bank has its own figures, and the government and the Ministry of Economic Development have their own. It is not 4.1%, but 2 to 2.5%, but we need to make sure things do not collapse or freeze too much. It's a fine line to walk, but I hope we will cope with it. We can get back to it later. However, I suggest that we do not start a discussion right now, because if we do, we will be talking through the night. I know that. Yesterday, or was it already today, Mr. Orshkin and I sat until 2 a.m., or rather 3 a.m. So, we really talked until the morning. I hope we will eventually go down that path, tread lightly, and get the result we need. The so-called Western dominance slipping away and new global growth centers taking the center stage is a long-term trend, and I want to emphasize that. Yes, of course, we are fully aware of the advantages offered by our so-called Western partners, such as advanced technology and production process organization. They have that, it is true. They have achieved a lot. We should respect that and use their best practices, but not copy them. We should keep in mind that growth rates in various regions of the world will remain stable over the next several decades. And the fact that we have, to a certain extent, refocused our priorities, not through our fault, by the way, due to a number of circumstances, may be a good thing. We are shifting our focus to global promising markets. All things that we need we will get one way or another. Of course, this long-term trend will remain unchanged. It will be bolstered up by, among other things, the BRICS development platform that is currently taking shape. It will include resource, technology, personnel, finance, trade, and investment components at a whole new level with the use of cutting-edge digital solutions, which will maximize the platform's effectiveness and keep negative outside interference at bay. I very much count on Russian businesses taking an active part in these joint projects with our BRICS partners and future BRICS members. Colleagues, I will address another crucial issue that concerns domestic businesses and pertains to Russia's relations with overseas states. Let me reiterate. This concerns the possible return, of foreign companies that exited our market in 2022 and thereafter. I have previously noted that Russian businesses skillfully capitalized on this opportunity, occupied vacated market niches, invested funds, created jobs, and dedicated considerable time and effort to developing technologies. Now, certain departed companies are indeed contemplating a return. We are aware of this, though I will refrain from elaborating further to avoid interference. However, our enterprises that have assumed their positions are at various stages of the investment cycle. Some have already made capital investments and established production, while others are only commencing projects and initiating construction despite the high interest rate. Naturally, we have no right to undermine these plans or nullify the efforts and funds invested. The interests of Russian companies, enterprises, and their employees will always remain a priority. It is from this standpoint that we will approach the question of overseas businesses returning to our market. I would emphasize that among foreign companies which left Russia under political pressure from the so-called elites of their countries, some have retained personnel and technologies while transferring management to Russian executives. Effectively, they continued operating in our market under a different brand. We recognize that such investors took significant risks, potentially incurring negative repercussions from their governments, yet they made an independent and responsible choice. A choice we unequivocally respect and will continue to honor in our dealings with such partners. However, there were other companies that made a demonstrative exit, opting to sell their Russian operations, often at a steep discount, and proceeded accordingly. Worse still, some began sabotaging operations, thereby jeopardizing entire teams, their Russian clients, suppliers, and contractors. Incidentally, these companies are well known to us, and we were compelled to introduce interim administration in their case. I acknowledge that some Western owners were intimidated and lacked the resolve to oppose their political authorities. This explains their conduct. Yet, anticipating a shift in the political winds, they preserved a loophole, retaining buyback rights through prearranged options. I instruct the government to closely monitor this situation and similar transactions to prevent scenarios where owners sold their Russian businesses at knockdown prices, effectively abandoning them, only to now seek repurchasing these assets at equally trivial sums. This cannot be permitted. Such practices are untenable. Market conditions have shifted, companies have strengthened, increased their capitalization, and now command entirely different valuations. Consequently, each such transaction will evidently require individual, thorough consideration. To reiterate, we did not ask anyone to leave. Those who left our market chose to do so themselves under pressure from the elites of their respective countries, or without such pressure, it does not really matter. In any case, we are talking about seasoned businessmen who analyzed risks and were clear about the consequences. If the Western companies' niches have now been taken by Russian business, then, as I said before, and we have a popular saying to that effect, this train has left the station, and there will be no privileges or preferences for the returning companies. At the same time, Russia remains an open country. Whoever wants to return are welcome to do so on a competitive basis in accordance with our law. I am asking the government to update the list of foreign companies that have stopped working in Russia, and to develop a procedure for coordinating their return with mandatory guarantees of good faith and conscientious business practices in our country. Of course, this process must be as transparent as it gets. Colleagues, Russia is carrying out large-scale and long-term development plans, launching major infrastructure, industrial and transport projects, developing vast unparalleled territories in the Far East, Siberia, the Arctic, and other regions of our country, and strengthening promising and mutually beneficial ties with the vast majority of countries around the world. Transitioning to a sustainable trajectory of balanced growth is the main challenge for the national economy. I want to emphasize the balanced growth trajectory. We will need to ensure high quality and intensive dynamics in the real sector by upgrading production facilities and increasing productivity. Better yet, it should be done through the use of innovative technologies rather than intensive approaches. And we need to increase the output of goods and services across the broadest possible range, thus forming a supply-side economy. At the same time, it is important to avoid unbalancing of individual industries and skewing key macro parameters. This is our most important objective. Among other things, we must contain inflation and bring unemployment down. This is a common task facing both the government and businesses. Not just major businesses that are part of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, but small and medium-sized businesses as well. Based on the entrepreneurs' demands, we will continue to align the mechanisms of the entire state economic policy, including monetary policy, to make sure that these mechanisms work primarily to increase Russia's production potential, to put new enterprises into operation, and to strengthen the country's technological and financial sovereignty and its human resources potential. The government is currently preparing a corresponding plan that includes additional measures. I count on active participation of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, as well as other business associations in our country, in this work. And of course, I wish everyone success for the benefit of Russia. Thank you.
Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on the stories that shape our world. This is Adaka Africa, bringing you the geopolitics you need to know. See you in the next one.